Hello, welcome back guys, and in previous video we found a couple of issues related to table components. We fixed all those issues, and then we again find one more reactivity issue which is related to menu item. So let's fix that issue in this video, and then we'll integrate update book and delete book functionality as well. So let me first go back to mutations in the auth store, and instead of assigning the default state method over there, right, this time I'm just going to use the individual variable over there, and I'm going to assign it back to null. That means nothing but the previous state of the application. So I'll say just save it, and I'll go back in UI, and here what I'm going to say is, okay, let me just close this tab. All right, and here what I'm going to say is just go back to logout, and you can see that it's getting logged out successfully, right? So let me log in back again, and I'll show you how this is working fine. So I'll say okay, email, you can enter email, and then of course we need to enter password as well. So once you click on login, and then you can see this list page over there, and if you'll click on this menu icon and click on logout, you should be able to log out successfully without any issue now, because of that state mutation it was not working, because we were assigning the initial state method over there, and which has issues. So instead of doing that, we are going to do individual item, we are going to reset the individual item state, right? Now let's log in once more, and this time we are going to integrate update API, right? We already saw how we can integrate get all API, and where should we call all those APIs so that our list should come. And then we also show this cool table component which is working in the expected way. We should be able to stretch these columns, we should make it bigger as well. So next what we are going to show is, we are going to just click on this icon, and then we can see here we have cool book data which is getting binded to the specific input. Now next thing what we are going to do is, we are going to just integrate that API, and for that we are going back in book store, and here you can see we have created update book ID methods, right, which is nothing but it is calling update book API internally, and then we'll get back those data, right? So for integrating this API, for calling this action function, I'm going back in add book, and here what I will say is, okay, update this update book API, but this time I'm going to say update book by ID, let's say the alias name. Okay, I'm going to use the same alias name as the actions method name. Cool. So I don't need this local storage over here, and then we have map actions over there, right? So that's cool. And then finally here what I'm going to do is, I'm going to just assign this append object to the specific book, right, book object, so that we will have the latest data of this book, and then we can modify all those data. But then we need to call this update function as well, so we just need to say okay, use this action method, and this will trigger that action functionality, and which in turn API will get triggered. So now we are good with this data, and we have added one more data over here, which is of course modified date. When you are going to modify certain object or data, the modified date should also be there, right? Here I am going to do one more thing. So this time update book by ID, that's completely fine, and then let's save it and go back to UI. Now if I'll click on update, it should actually update this data in the DB, and we should be able to see that changes once more. So for that, let's go back in network tab, and I'll just click on, I'll just change something over here. I'll say NAR, okay, or I'll say that's fine, NAR, and then price I'm going to make as 200. So let's click on this update functionality, and then we can see something is breaking, which is unknown local action type update book by ID. That means that update book by ID does not exist on this action. So for that, what we need to do is, we need to go back in action file, and there we need to verify if this action exists or not. Yes, this action actually exists there. So I'll just copy the name, exact name, and I will come back here in the add book page. And here I'll just paste that name, right? I think it is the same name we are using. So I'll paste it here as well. I'll paste it here as well. So now this action should be present on this specific methods. We should be able to use these actions. Let me go back to UI. I will refresh the page and I will change the data, let's say NAR. I will also change the price of this to, let's say, $40. Once I'll click on update, still we can see a non-local action type, update book by ID. And why is happening that? Let's go back here. This dot update book by ID, that's completely fine. It should trigger this API actually. So let's debug that. Why is it happening? So we have mapped those functionality in the map actions, right, which is working the expected way, and then this should be called successfully over here. And let's verify this update functionality. Yeah, this is also working fine. So what can be the issue now? We have book store over there, and then let's go back to book action store. All right, and here we can see create book is there, get all, update book by ID is also there. Then why it is not getting triggered? And that is because we have not saved this file, you can see here. So I'll just save this file and let's go back to UI. We'll do the same operation once more and we'll see if that works. I'll clear this network console so that we'll be able to see the fresh network call, and I'll see it's going to be, let's say, $60 this time, and I will click on update. Now you can see we have successfully triggered this update API, but you can see here we have underscore ID there, and in header as well we have the book ID, but we are getting 500. That means our server failed to handle this response. Let's go back in server code and we can see there we are getting some error there. And why is that so? So here we can say interface conversion, right? Interface is noted update book DTO, and we are expecting it to be interface, but we got map of string and interface. And from where this error is exactly coming? So this error is exactly coming from update book by ID. So once we'll go in update book by ID, and how can we go there? So for that we need to open this server folder, and then this comes inside book service, right? So I will go back in book service file, and here we have update book by ID, right? So the thing is we are accepting data as an interface over here, so we cannot cast it to map of string interface, right? So let's say we need to say, okay, this data will be of type map of string and interface, so that we don't need to typecast it. Okay, so I'll say map of string interface, fine. Now we don't need to typecast it, and we can take out those data directly. Okay, but before that we need to send map of string interface as well in this function. So we need to change the method signature as well, since we are following the concept of interface. And how can we do that? We need to go back in update book by ID, and here I'm going to make changes. So I'll say this time the map of string and interface will be coming, so you need to make adjustment according to that. But then we need to verify the controller function as well if we are sending the same data. So let's see that. Okay, this is of type update book DTO actually, and we are expecting map over there, which is of course wrong. So we can say, okay, then let's typecast into a map instead of update book DTO. But then it's going to be security concern. So if any data is coming from the client side, right, that will get saved into collection, which is not the expected way of saving the data. So this update book DTO will be there, should be there as it is, and we actually need to modify here. we need to take interface instead of this map of string and interface. So I'm just going to copy this as it is, and I'm going to paste the same below in the implementation as well. Alright, and here then we don't need to typecast it, or we don't need to do any functionality. I will just say okay, just change it to DTO dot and update book DTO. Alright, so here now I'm going to say okay, ID is going to be book data, right, dot and ID, right, and then let me save it and we'll see that in action if this works fine. Meanwhile it is getting restarted. I'll go back in client code. Let's attach the delete functionality as well. So for that we need to go into bookstore actions file, and there we need to define this delete API as well. So what I need to do here is I'll just copy paste this and I'll say delete book by ID. So I'll say delete book by ID, and then of course book data we are going to take here, and then but here we are going to say delete book by ID. This delete book by ID is not present in API, so we need to go back to API as well, and here we need to say okay. Before that you need to define the URL for delete as well. So for that what I'm going to say here is define one URL for delete. So this time I'm going to say delete book URL, right? So now instead of update I will put delete. I'll save it and go back to api.js file where we can implement that functionality. So I'll just say let's copy this and paste it over here, and we are going to use same post API, but this time the delete API, not delete API but delete book URL, right? Let me just rename this functionality as well. So I'll say delete book, I'll save it, and then we have that API ready in place, and I'm going to use this API here in the list page, since we have that icon inside the list page. So for that what I'm going to do here is we have book stored over there, so we just need to map those functions, and that function is going to be of course delete book by ID. So the similar function we have here in delete API, let's say delete book, right? And this time if we are going to delete any book, that book should get deleted from the table list. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I will say okay, once this is successful, what you need to do is you need to just delete the specific book. For that I'm going to say commit, and I will say delete book from list, let's say, and here I'm going to provide book ID. So I'll say book data dot underscore, not underscore but book data dot underscore ID. Now we need to make a mutation so that we should be able to mutate this state variable, and then that specific item get deleted from the UI as well, right? Because the data is reactive. As soon as we'll mutate this state data, those actions, those getter will get triggered, and then UI will get refreshed, right? So I'll go back in mutation and I'll say okay, just define this method, and what this method will do, it will have a state and then the book ID we are passing from there, right? So what I'll say here is state dot opened book, right? And then we need to splice, we need to use splice, which is one method in array. Using that we can remove one item from the specific index. So I'll say splice, and hopefully this will just mutate the original array. Okay, so I will say okay, we need index for that. Then doing for using before using splice, I need to find index as well. So I'll say book index, right? And then here I'll say state dot opened book, right, dot find index, and then I'll say b dot underscore id is going to be this book id, right? Not triple equals to but say book id. All right, so we will be having index. What we will say, okay, just use this index to splice the item. So I'll say book index, and then one item will get spliced over there, right? And then let's hover on this. Okay, this splice will work, and finally we are going to again assign those, update those book items in the local storage as well. So here what I'm going to say is okay, books, and then state dot, not, we are not going to use opened book, of course we are going to use books here. So here as well we are going to say state dot books. Okay, so we are good with this, and let me save this. Let me go back to action file over there. We are good with this, and hopefully this should be working fine. So I'll go back in book list page, and there we already have those method. You can see here on action I can click, and in case of delete, what I'm going to do is I will just copy this action method name and call this there. So let me do that. What you need to do is not here but the book list page, right? So here what you need to do is you need to map that method here so that you can be able to call this method. So let's call this method now here, this dot, and delete book by id. It is expecting data, right? So you need to provide the data here. So I'll say data, and the data is going to be, of course, the value dot data, right? On this data we have underscore id. So there, this using this data, that underscore id will get fetched, and then the respective data will get deleted, right? So I will save it, and we can see the server has restarted. So now our functionality should be working fine, but still we have error over there. That means we need to delete this book id as well from here, right? So let's do one thing. We'll rectify that in the later time. And here what I'm going to do is in the not auth controller but the book controller, instead of accepting this update book DTO, I'm going to say okay, let's accept map of string and then interface. Okay, it's going to be interface, and then this is completely fine, and the same parameter I'm going to accept in the book service as well, so that we don't need to type cost here. All right, and then rest of the code will be working as it is. I'll paste it here, then we should be able to delete this, not the id, this time it will be underscore id, right? And then here also I'm going to change the method signature so that this interface will get satisfied, and we should be able to use book service for the implementation. So I'll say data, I'll just save it, and then this should work. Let's wait for a couple of seconds, and this server should restart, and finally we should be able to trigger this APIs and it should work. It's taking a lot more time to restart the server. It depends on the system. All right, this is it. Now this has been started. Let me go back to UI, and I will just say okay, let me refresh this page first. Okay, we have the data now, and then I'll say okay, change the code to nar, and then the price to, let's say, $65, and I'll click on update. Still we are having issues in the update API, and I'll go back here. We can see still that is breaking. That means this interface conversion is expecting interface is DTO update book DTO not map interface. So where it is expecting to be update book DTO. Okay, we are providing ID over there, that's completely fine, and this ID should be of type string. Then we need to type cast it to a string. Let me save it, right? And then book service.go 33, that is completely fine. That's the expectation. And I'll go once more back into the book controller, and over there we can see, okay, this is also fine, update book by ID. So now we should not get any error over there, and it should be working fine. Okay, now server is running. I'll just click on update once more, and once more it got broken. Update document must contain key beginning with $. Okay, that means this error is coming from repository. Let's go back in repository and then update method. So here we can see update 1 we are calling over there, and then we are providing context, filter, and then update as well. So now this update is of type interface, that is completely fine. So why it is breaking now? We can see here index out of range, that is 1 with length 1. Why is that so? That is unexpected error which we are expecting over here. We need to debug this. Alright, but meanwhile what I'll do is I'll just check if the delete is working fine or not. So I'll go back to book list page, and then from there we should be able to trigger delete as well. So let's say this is what I'm going to delete here. I'll say delete, and you can see here delete is getting successfully, and that item is also deleted from this list, right? And how can we verify that? Let's refresh this page, and that item should not be there at all. So if I'll come here, that item is not there, that means delete is working fine. So that is it guys for this video, and in the upcoming videos we'll of course debug this error, why this error is happening, and then we'll rectify the update functionality, and we'll see a couple of more concepts over there. And if you guys feel any problem or any issues, you can put down your comment in the comment section. I will try to address all those as early as possible. Thank you guys, we'll meet in